Here's something you were never taught in school. Humans didn't take over the planet because we were the strongest. We weren't. We didn't do it because we were the fastest, or the biggest, or the best in a fight. On paper, we're a joke slow, soft, hairless, born helpless, easy to kill. And yet, if you pull up a map of every large animal on Earth and ask which one lives on every single continent, there is exactly one answer. Us, lions never left Africa and Asia. Bears never reached Australia. Not one big mammal spread the way we did. So how did the weakest option in the room end up everywhere? The answer is stranger, and a lot more reckless than good genes. Start with the boring truth. For most of our existence, we did nothing impressive with geography. Our species is roughly 300,000 years old. The oldest fossils we'd call us come from Jebel Irhoud in Morocco, and for something like 250,000 years, we basically stayed home. One regional African animal among many. No continents conquered, no oceans crossed. And here's the part that matters. When we finally did spread out, our bodies didn't change to make it possible. Same legs, same lungs, same soft, clawless, unarmored frame. Whatever let us take the planet, it wasn't a physical upgrade. It was a habit of mind, a willingness to walk toward a place you cannot see and have no proof even exists. Every animal expands its range when it gets crowded or hungry. It drifts into the next valley. What we did is different in kind, not degree. We crossed gaps we couldn't see across. On purpose. Hold on to that idea, because it's the whole story. So let's follow the trail out. Around 60,000 years ago, give or take, a small band of humans slipped out of Africa through the corridor near the Red Sea and the Sinai. Not an army. Not a migration in the Hollywood sense. A trickle. And this is the fact that should stop you. Nearly every person alive today outside of Africa, every European, every East Asian, every Native American, every Aboriginal Australian descends from that one small founding group. The Dina is blunt about it. The population that walked out and seeded the entire rest of the planet may have been just a few thousand people. The whole world, minus one continent, is the family tree of a group that could fit inside a single modern high school. Read that again. Almost everyone you've ever seen who wasn't in Africa distant cousins. All of them. From one lucky handful who made it through the gate. Now it gets genuinely strange, because the next thing these people did makes no sense for a land animal. Around 65,000 years ago, and we know this from a site in northern Australia called Majid Bebe, excavated and dated by archaeologists in 2017, humans reached the continent of Australia. The problem is that Australia has never been connected to Asia by land. Not once. Even at the peak of the ice ages, when so much water was locked into glaciers that coastlines crawled miles out to sea, there were still open water gaps, stretches of deep ocean, tens of miles wide, between the islands of Southeast Asia and the Australian landmass. You cannot see across that. And you cannot drift across it by accident and live one lost fisherman doesn't start a population. To put breeding numbers of people on the far shore, you needed boats, and you needed to use them again and again, aiming out at open water where the horizon showed you absolutely nothing. That happened 65,000 years ago. The oldest actual boat anyone has ever dug out of the ground, a hollowed out log called the Pessie canoe, from the Netherlands, is only about 10,000 years old. So the physical evidence of boats shows up more than 50,000 years after we already know people were crossing the sea. The rafts rotted. The crossings didn't. But the ocean wasn't even the deadliest gate. To get anywhere near the Americas, humans first had to do something arguably harder push into the far north of Asia, into Siberia, into some of the most lethal cold on the planet. And this is where the single most important piece of survival technology is one you'd never put on a poster. Not a spear. A needle. A tropical ape has no business surviving a Siberian winter. Bare skin, no fur, you freeze, you die. What changed everything was tailored clothing. Fitted, sewn, layered clothing that actually seals heat against the body. We've found eyed sewing needles from over 40,000 years ago, including ones from Denisova Cave in Siberia. And that humble little tool is quietly one of the reasons you're alive. Add fire. Add shelters built from mammoth bone real places, like Mezerich in Ukraine, homes framed from the bones of dozens of mammoths, and a naked equatorial animal learned to live where the air itself is trying to kill it. We didn't outmuscle the cold, we outsewed it. And surviving Siberia unlocked the last empty landmasses on Earth. During the Ice Age, so much water was frozen that a bridge of dry land connected Asia to Alaska, a stretch of cold grassland we call Beringia. People lived out there for generations. The genetics hint at a long pause, a kind of holding, before the way south finally opened. Then they poured in. Footprints preserved at White Sands, in New Mexico, have been dated to somewhere around 21 to 23,000 years ago, humans deep in the heart of North America, far earlier than we used to believe was possible. And once they were through, the spread was almost violently fast. There's a site near the bottom of Chile called Monte Verde, with people living there around 14,500 years ago. From the top of Alaska to the tail of South America, the length of 2 whole continents in what, on the geological clock, is barely an afternoon, which leaves the hardest conquest of all. And here's the twist most people get backwards. It didn't come first. It came last. The Pacific Ocean is the single largest feature on the surface of the Earth. It is bigger than all the land on the planet put together. And scattered across it are tiny islands, some of them just a few miles wide, separated by thousands of miles of empty blue in every direction. By every reasonable logic, those islands should have stayed empty forever. They didn't. Starting around 3,000 years ago, the ancestors of the Polynesians began sailing straight into that void. No compass, no map, no instruments of any kind. They navigated by memorizing the stars, by feeling the direction of ocean swells rolling against the hull, by reading the flight paths of birds and the color of the light beneath distant clouds, light that hangs differently over hidden land. And with nothing but that, they found essentially every habitable island in the Pacific: Hawaii, Rapa Nui, and finally, New Zealand. And the skill was so precise, so real, that it isn't just history. In the 1970s, a navigator named Mau Piailug sailed a traditional canoe thousands of miles across open ocean, using only these methods, no instruments at all, and proved the old way still worked. We didn't inherit a legend. We inherited a technology, written in the sky. There's a shadow to this story, and it deserves saying out loud. Wherever humans arrived, the biggest animals tended to vanish. Australia's giant marsupials, the mammoths and giant ground sloths of the Americas. In New Zealand, a huge flightless bird called the moa was gone within roughly a century or two of people setting foot on the islands. We were the most successful travelers in the history of life on this planet, and we left a trail of emptied ecosystems behind us. The same nerve that carried us everywhere made us dangerous everywhere we landed. So step back and look at the map now, and notice what's missing. Because there is exactly one continent our ancestors never reached, not on foot, not by sail. Antarctica, no human being walked there, ever, until we had engines and steel ships, barely 2 centuries ago. It is the one place that muscle and nerve and a wooden hull could not take us, which tells you exactly how far muscle and nerve and a wooden hull actually did. Every other shore on this entire planet, we reached the hard way. Not because we were built for it. We weren't. We reached them because something in us refused to look at an empty horizon and stay where it was safe. So how did the weakest animal in the room end up on every coast on Earth? Not by being the strongest, not by being the fastest, by being the only one that couldn't leave the horizon alone, the one that stared at open water with nothing on the other side, and pushed off anyway. You come from the ones who went.